Thank you for showing up at 9 o'clock in the morning in Miami. I think that's actually the greatest feat of all time. This is not a city where people show up on time, and that's okay. Well, this summit's a really special event. Every year we hold a summit for IOHK. We did one in Portugal, we did one in Malta, we did one in Latvia, one in Corfu. And every time we do it, it's always a private event. And the reason why we do these events is that we're a distributed company. We're in 16 countries, and people work at home, some in their underwear, some late at night, and they have a lot of fun. But the problem is they're siloed, they're isolated. They don't get to see each other, they don't get to talk to each other outside of Slack and email, and that's a sometimes dehumanizing process. So we said, bring everybody together at least once a year and have them have a chance to get to know each other, meet each other, drink with each other, and that'll probably make us a better company. That'll probably make us a better ecosystem. But every time we do it, the community kind of knows about it because we kind of all go on holiday for a week. And they say, can we come along? And we said, all right, why not? This is the first time we're going to open it up to the general public. So on behalf of IOHK, welcome to Miami. And thank you so much for coming. It really means the world to all of us. We have people representing more than 20 countries here. You'll see a lot of languages spoken. In fact, IOHK is famous for collecting very strange tongues. We recently brought someone on board who speaks Romansh. If you're not sure what that is, well, it's basically the closest thing you'll ever get to Roman Latin. We had another person who worked for us for a while who spoke Aramaic, which is, I thought, a dead tongue, but apparently 30,000 people still speak it. Go figure. So it's a good opportunity to get to meet our best and brightest. So why am I here? Well, first I'm here to introduce the summit, but then also to talk a bit about where we've been and where we're going. And so I thought a lot about, well, what's the best way of doing that? What's the best way of presenting that? And I worked on a collection of slide decks. I had some fun with that. I actually had 2 of them. I got conjunctivitis the week before, so I couldn't see out of my left eye, but I was still working hard on it, and it was fun. But I said, it would be much better just to use these lovely banners here. You guys like the banners? Yeah, they're pretty cool. They were made by a Greek designer named Dimitris, and like all open source decentralized movements, we found him through Twitter. He just was posting this weird cubal art, and I said, wow, that's so cool. And then Richard hunted him down and convinced him to do some great artwork for us. So we have a few different people. Does anybody know who this is? This is Cardano. This is Ada, Byron, Shelley, Goguen, Basho, and Voltaire. And let's talk about the history of the Cardano project. So back in 2015, a consortium of people in Japan came to us and said, it would be really cool to do the Ethereum of Japan. And I said, well, that would be super cool, but I already did Ethereum. In fact, we launched Ethereum here. The North American Bitcoin Conference back in January of 2014 was held in this building. And actually, that's where Vitalik did his presentation. So that's old territory. If we're going to do something, let's do something interesting. Let's innovate. And they said, well, okay, where's the next generation going to go? Ethereum kind of owns this one. And we said, well, what we need to do is we need to have something that has 3 properties. We kind of call these the 3 pillars of Cardano. One is that the system needs to get faster, it stays the same performance as it gains more users. So this concept of scalability. So if you have millions of people in the system, billions of people in the system, you still get a good performance. It still works. It doesn't collapse in on its own weight. That's hard. Second, there's not going to just be one cryptocurrency. There's not just one financial system. There's thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of different ways you can do everything from send to security to send an online payment. So there needs to be some notion of interoperability. And finally, if these things are to work, you need to have some notion of sustainability. Basically, who pays and who decides. So these were the bedrocks of the system. Pretty simple: scalability, interoperability, and sustainability. That's where the conversation started in 2015. So I said, if you could put together some funding, we'd be happy to go spend 5 years beating our heads against the wall, writing lots of papers, going all around the world, evangelizing, writing tons of code, and seeing how far along this crazy dream we could get. So in essence, we basically started a DARPA project. Yeah, high risk, high return, reach for the stars, let's see how far you can go. And sometimes you succeed, like with TCP/IP, and other times, even if you don't quite get what you want, like with Kalo, you still get Siri. Pretty magical. So we started in 2015, we got funding, and then we started thinking really carefully about, well, what does the technology look like? What do we actually need to do? What type of code do we need to write? Do we just fork Bitcoin and start there? Well, no, because Bitcoin is a collection of design decisions, as is Ethereum. There's context behind that. There is a whole bunch of unspoken lore that exists there. Let's be more foundational. Let's take a step back, and let's think carefully about what are we actually trying to do? What are the consensus algorithms we could use? What's the type of ledger we could design? What type of scripting language do we actually need? How expressive does it need to be? How private do the transactions need to be? What does the metadata need to look like? These types of things. So we went shopping and we found all kinds of different opinions. We looked at things like Alex Cherpinoy's ScoreX, which was a Scala framework. We found the GKL model that Agalos and his co-authors wrote. And we realized, wow, if we're going to do this, we actually need to hire a lot of scientists, and we need to do some very foundational research. And all of a sudden, people are like, well, wait a minute, won't that take years? And I said, yes, it will take years, but it's the right thing to do. So we started that process. We spent quite a bit of time hiring people. In fact, that's why we went to Corfu, Greece. It was the Bitcoin summer school, and that's where we met Agalos and a lot of great cryptographers like Vasilis and others for the first time. And the consequence of that was that we were able to set up a research lab. And that research lab at Edinburgh, and one in Tokyo Tech, and one in Athens, allowed us to actually start writing foundational papers on every topic that was relevant to the cryptocurrency space. We wrote papers on programming languages, and we wrote our own programming languages. We wrote papers on how to design a ledger, different accounting systems, like the difference between UTXO accounting and Ethereum-style accounts, and if they're the same thing, or if they're so different they can't work with each other. We wrote a whole series of papers on proof of stake. Actually, I think 6 or 7. It's hard to know. The Ouroboros just keep growing. It's like a hydra. It keeps sprouting heads. And it's kind of funny, the terminus paper there is called hydra. But at the end of the day, we've written now more than 40 papers. And the first release of the system was Byron, after Lord Byron, who actually I think was the father of Ada Lovelace. And a great poet, too. I actually love his poetry. Kind of a scoundrel and a lady killer, but most people are in these ages. And we said, you know, it'd be a lot of fun just to launch something, give it to the community, and see where we can go with it. Because at the end of the day, before we can go anywhere else, you have to have a community. And all of this, all of the start, was just us in a room, talking to each other, thinking about science, thinking about code, trying different approaches, hiring different types of developers. But nothing is ever truly good until the market says it's good, until you say it's good, the community says it's good. So Byron was a very major milestone for us. It was shipped in September of 2017. We were just on one exchange. It was Bittrex. Nobody really knew who the hell we were. They're like, what is this weird name? They couldn't even pronounce Cardano. I'm like, that's an easy word. Come on, guys. There's some strange words. But no, they couldn't. And that's okay. And what Byron was basically all about was about building a community, getting liquidity, getting drift of the currency, getting people on board with the idea of a third-generation cryptocurrency, making people care about the research, making people care about where do we want to go and what do we want to do. So the Byron era is over. We shipped our last Byron update in Q1, and that was 1.5. So what did we learn and where did we go? Well, we went from just a small community to about 500,000 people, according to the metrics we've seen all around the world. Everywhere from Korea to China to Japan. We have some fans in Mongolia. We have some fans in Georgia, both the state and the country. We have fans all around the world. In fact, we're represented in more than 50 countries, and I've personally been to more than 50 countries in the last 3 years. Pretty amazing. And not only that, we're now on 25 plus exchanges, reasonable liquidity, been in the top 10 for a while. So people really have paid attention and said, this is pretty cool. We also have some really amazing fans. We put together a Telegram channel. We said, is anybody interested in staking? You know, anybody want to run a stake pool? Anybody care about actually running this system? 1,200 people joined. And a lot of these people have great technological skills. They come from sysadmin backgrounds, or they're computer scientists themselves. It's just overwhelming to see the diversity. And they're not all from America. Some are from Africa, some are from South America. They're all around the world, unified by this concept that we can do better than where we've come before. And it's okay to take time to do better. It's okay to do things right. It's okay to write good papers. It's okay to use formal methods. So people liked that. And that was really, really humbling, because at the end of the day, most of our scientists and most of our engineers who do this type of work, their papers are mostly ignored by the general public. In fact, when we brought some journalists to crypto, I think it was one of the first time they've actually had mainstream journalists at crypto. They were a Forbes journalist, and they said, well, I don't know how we issue a media pass. Let's figure that out. So they weren't really used to this idea that people would actually care about arcane things like a formal specification and concepts like refinement types and bisimulation. Why would they care about these crazy, strange concepts? Well, because if we're actually going to get to a system that's the next generation, that's worth anything, that's going to have billions of people, that system has to work. That's your money. That's your property. That's your identity. That's your privacy. This is your life. And if this system has dominion over the things you care most about, it would be really unfortunate if the system didn't work. It'd be really unfortunate if a glitch cost you your life savings, and that's where we're currently at in the cryptocurrency space. So we were overwhelmed by the response. And it got so loud that people kept asking, when Shelley? Anybody excited about Shelley? Yeah, me too. We've been working real hard on that. So what is Shelley? Well, Shelley is kind of something like this. You say, oh gosh, what's this? Well, it's a magic little piece of hardware. You see, the concept of Shelley is about turning the network over to the world and making it as decentralized as possible. So we wanted kind of to have a nice proof of concept, a visual representation of what that actually means. And we can get to the numbers of what that actually means. So we say things like, it's going to be more decentralized than Bitcoin. It's going to be much more efficient than Bitcoin. And these are kind of qualitative metrics, but you can't really visualize them. So one of our fans in the community, his name's Marcus, and his partner, they contacted us. They said, you know, we think we can get a stake pool. We think we can get Cardano running on a RockPi board. And I said, wow, that's really cool. How much does it cost? And they're like, oh, yeah, like $80. I said, cool. So he showed up here. He came from Europe. And on his own time and with his own company, he built this. This is not an IOHK product. This is something built by our community. It's open hardware, 6 cores, 4 gigs of RAM, a little bit of storage. And this can run a Cardano stake pool. It's also battery powered. That's why it has the cool little light. He even made the case himself. And true to form, you'll see that the paint is a little scratched off on the side. That's because when you show up at America with hardware that's not labeled, it really scares the hell out of the TSA. And they say, like, what is this thing? And they scratch the paint a little bit. And he was pretty miffed about it because he's Italian and he likes design. It's like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you people? Anyway, so stake pools, they're coming. We actually have a boatload of Rust code we've written, a boatload of Haskell code we've written, and both teams are represented here. Duncan Coutts is here and Vincent Henkes is here. And boy, they've been working incredibly hard. Basically like not sleeping on the weekends hard. And we're very, very close actually to getting basically the stake pools ready to go, the testnet ready to go. And what is it going to mean? Well, brass tacks. Basically, the way we designed the system is we wanted the system to be as fluid and open as possible. So, first, if you want to participate in consensus, this is done by registering a stake pool. Who can do that? Anyone. And how do you do that? On the blockchain. And what interface do you use? You can use Daedalus. Pretty simple. Keep it simple. So, when we update to the Shelley update for Daedalus, and for Cardano, there's going to be an interface inside the wallet itself that basically allows you to fill out data and submit a transaction, and then suddenly you have a stake pool. And then how do you find stake pools? Well, you find that through some sort of index, through some sort of catalog. And where's the best place to display that? Daedalus, right? And actually, not to be outdone, our partner Emergo is also going to do that with Yoroi. So if you're a Yoroi user, you'll have a stake pool center. You can register, and you can look at them. Now, how do you delegate to somebody? Well, it would be a great user experience if you could just click it and click delegate, and you're done. So you can. That's the user experience. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we can have as many of them as we want. It also means that everybody can participate. And then it's up to the community to decide who ought to be in charge. And you notice the barrier to entry is pretty low. I mean, this is a reference piece of hardware for about $100. I don't know if you can get any cheaper than that. If someone can get this working on a Raspberry Pi, that'd be really cool. Then we have a $50 price point. But I'm willing to wager that anyone in the world has enough computing power to do this. And our hope is that we'll have at least 1,000 stake pools by the end of 2019 that are registered and people are actively delegating to them. And there's a lot of tuning that we can do. If you read the specifications we recently pushed, there's a lot of theory and very elegant math that we've put into how the incentives work and how the tuning works. So what would 1,000 stake pools mean? Well, if you look at the numbers, Bitcoin has roughly about 10 major mining operations. And that constitutes about 51% or more of the hash power of the system. These are huge operations. Actually, the country of Georgia has one of them. If you ever go there, it's massive, massive place. It's like very hot, tons of energy consumption. It spoils the wine. That's like a national sin. But it's not easy to run them. It's not easy to participate in them. It's not easy to get access to the hardware, the technology, the techniques. It's a closed system. And there's only roughly 10 of them. With our system, if there's 1,000, we're 100 times more decentralized in the beginning. And there's no reason we can't keep moving forward and can't keep adding more and more of these systems and getting more geographic diversity. So the system will organically get, over time, more decentralized because there is no economy of scale benefit to building large data clusters, and there's no patented hardware or any of these things. Second, what happens when your government no longer likes mining? Can you move that data center? Is it really easy to go and move 50,000 servers? Has anybody tried? I imagine Neil's probably done it. There's a few people here that have had war stories about having to move things. No. Whereas, how hard is it to move one of these guys? How hard is it to just flash something and boot something up with a laptop? Click a button. Suddenly you've changed geographies. You don't even know where the controls are. It's virtual. Like our software, like our currency, it lives on the internet. Doesn't live in the physical world. These are just entry and exit points. Furthermore, by having a stake pool structure the way that we've set it up, these aren't just processing transactions. These things can also be lightning nodes. These things can be oracles. These things can run trusted computing cores to augment computation. They can do all kinds of things as service providers to the system. And you know who they are. They're registered on a blockchain. So suddenly we can actually start moving towards services. We can start looking at the protocol as providing to dApp developers things that they can do. For example, we have a protocol coming out soon called Ouroboros Chronos. Anybody like NTP? You're like good fans of NTP? Like it's like this, you get up every morning and say NTP is the best thing in the whole world. No, most people don't, especially the people who've actually used it. Well, what if we could just decentralize that, put a blockchain on that? What if we could just decouple the clock and actually make it a service of the network? Well, we got a paper coming out that's going to do that. Second, anybody ever need a source of random numbers? A cryptographic beacon, one that the NSA didn't bias? You don't want to put lava lamps in a room and take a picture every now and then for your noise? Well, what if your blockchain can provide that infrastructure? Well, it turns out that the way that we've designed the core protocols that go into Shelley, over time, we'll be able to provide these services to smart contract developers and many other pieces of infrastructure. And the stake pool infrastructure is very amenable, and competition is very amenable for those service providers to add more and more functionality. So we're not just building a decentralized system, we're building a decentralized ecosystem of infrastructure. Infrastructure that you'll use to write smart contracts. So the other thing that's coming out very soon is Goguen. And what's Goguen all about? It's actually a parallel work stream that we had, and since we started it at the same time we started Shelley, they're about converging with each other pretty rapidly. And Goguen is all about smart contracts. So you see, it's one topic, it's one concept to do decentralization and to say, what is a decentralization all about? But the problem is you need to do something useful with your system. So Bitcoin can be much more decentralized, but at the end of the day, Bitcoin only pushes transactions to people. There's not much functionality there. This is why everybody's just working so hard to get Lightning and other capabilities there, because they really would like to do more with Bitcoin, and they like Bitcoin. So you need some sort of scripting language that allows you to express any type of functionality. Let's say you want to issue your own currency. Let's say you want to write a gambling application. Let's say that you want to write an identity management system. Let's say that you've come up with the latest and greatest healthcare record system, all of these things, and you need some form of decentralized infrastructure to broker the movement of people, credentials, and value between your users. The problem is that it is intractable, and I would be lying to you if I said that you could just run all of this on a blockchain. You can't. There's always going to be clients, there's always going to be servers, there's always going to be legacy infrastructure in your stack, either because your user wants it, because you need it for your user experience or cost, or because frankly it's just a really good idea to have it there. But yet sometimes it's nice to have blockchain infrastructure that can be a time-stamping service, that can be a random number generator, that can be any kind of these things. Well, that's what Goguen is all about, is sorting that out. Giving us an ability to have the off-chain and the on-chain married together and work as one, writing in one file. You take Plutus, it's embedded within Haskell. Your Haskell can run off-chain, your Plutus can run on-chain. And these two things together mean that you can actually write a full-stack application. And you actually know how it's going to behave. You know what it's going to do. You know when transactions are coming down. So the Plutus team has been working diligently for about 2.5 years, I think, now. Is that about right, Phil? We're getting old. And they did more than 15 revisions, and we got it to a point where that language can fit on a napkin. In fact, I'm not joking, we put it on a napkin in Scotland last year in December. And anyway, Goguen is all about bringing that to the user. And in many ways, these two releases are interconnected with each other because computation's not really that useful unless you get assurances that the computation is decentralized. Or else, what's the point? Why don't we just run it on a server? So this year, both of these are coming out. Shelley's shipping first, and Shelley's a big process. It's a social dynamic. You know, we're going to start making the binaries available for these little reference stake pools, and we'll make an announcement about that shortly after the conference, and we'll have some third-party vendors probably sell reference models. Testnet's coming out soon, and we're going to try to roll over the 1,200 people we have in the stake pool channel into the testnet, and those things together will allow us to begin the process of decentralization. That's going to take a time, because even if 100% of the code is deployed, you still need people. And you need people running things. And, you know, Satoshi released a fully, potentially decentralized system in January 3rd of 2009. How long did it actually take to get a reasonable set of miners for that system? It took well over a year for people to actually care about it. So social dynamics do take some time to set in. We're a little bit ahead of the curve from 2009, but this is an ongoing process. And you're going to see a lot of really cool new features in software, like multi-sig. You're going to see these little guys. If you've registered for the conference, you should have received a Tangem card. So what is this? Well, they're very cheap to make. They kind of look like a credit card. You tap it on the back of your phone, and it can open up a wallet. So this is not just a wallet. It also can be eventually an identity card, a geo-stamping service, something that can let you transact offline. There's a lot of magic that these things can do, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Anyway, that's coming. Goggen's coming. So what happens, and Richard's going to kill me for damaging these posters. So what happens next? Well, the really cool, exciting, fun stuff is for last. We have Basho. Anybody know who Basho is? Maybe a few people. So Basho actually was a man of enormous courage. He woke up one day and decided he wanted to just be a nomad and travel around medieval Japan. Now, there were certain countries in the world and certain time frames that you just do not become a wanderer and go around the world. And Japan in the medieval times was definitely one of them. Everybody was very tribal, and if you weren't from around here, they usually just kill you, or they'd think you're a spy and put you in prison, or your life would not be so good. And so you can imagine some guy just saying, hey, I'm a poet and a writer, and I'm just going around writing stuff down as I see things. No, I'm not a spy. Please trust me. Well, he did that. And not only did he do it, he wrote it all down, and he actually wrote some of the best poetry and great stories about Japan. And he's considered to be the soul of Japan. Many people love him. Well, Basho is all about scalability, and it's all about where are we going to take these protocols. You see, once decentralization is in place, and once we have these stake pools in place, and that process is well underway, at some point we can shard the system, which means that more pools equal more performance. And at some point, we can add layer 2 protocols into the system. So you'll see a presentation from Rob Cohen. He's one of our product managers, and he's probably going to integrate Lightning into our system. We're right now investigating that with some partners in the space. And the Ouroboros research line is nearly done on the single shard, the single thread, and the next step is to move into the sharded space. So we have some great innovations, parallel chains and side chains, and these two things together will, with some tender love and care and research magic, allow us to make the system significantly faster. So we decided to name it after somebody who's a bit of a nomad and a bit of a wanderer, because we're kind of wandering around the space looking for good ideas and wandering around the space and looking for interesting things. And Basho's coming, and it's going to be coming around 2020. Now, Voltaire is the last major milestone in the system, and it's the one that kind of makes the system live forever. So what's Voltaire all about? Well, Voltaire was kind of a cynic, and he wrote a lot of interesting things, and he had a habit of getting kicked out of countries and a habit of pissing people off. If there was Twitter, I think he would be he would be in the running with me for most hated man on Twitter. But anyway, levity aside, we decided we wanted to have a cool name for what the treasury system and the voting system of Cardano looks like. You see, there's a reason why we ordered things in these ways. You have to start somewhere with a philosophy to actually then get some people to care about your system. And then once people care about your system, they're going to want to participate and run the system. And they're going to want to do things with the system. And then the system has to have a good enough experience that people can actually use it at scale. But then after they do that, there's an open question of who maintains the system, governs the system, and pays for its growth. Well, that's got to be some process. Cryptocurrencies kind of print money for a living. This is what they do. That's why people care about them. So we can take the same thing we use to pay the stake pools, the same inflation mechanism, and you can put some of that inflation into a treasury system. Dash does this, and other cryptocurrencies do this. Not an entirely new idea. And if you attach a democratic process on top of it, saying that the people who contribute the most, the people who are most vested in the system, are kind of the custodians of it, you move from a governance of patrons and a governance of a cult of personality around a collection of leaders to a democracy, to a governance of you, the people. It's your system. And this means you're going to have disagreements and discourse and critics and cynics and all kinds of chaotic, crazy things. And so Voltaire is all about sorting that out. So you'll see Binsheng Zhang here. Binsheng, where are you at? Ah, there he is. Yeah, he's a brilliant professor out of Lancaster, and he's been working for quite some time writing treasury papers with a team specifically about how do you actually do this in a cryptocurrency in a way that is in some way sane or reasonable. So my hope is in Q1 of 2020 that we can get the treasury system into our platform. A preliminary version of it. All things are always versioned, and all things always can be improved. But then over time, that can evolve and grow and turn into something that that will allow us to basically turn the system completely over to the community. Not just over to the community in terms of stake pools are running it and you can write your own code, but there's no longer existential crisis of somebody controls the GitHub, somebody controls the development money, somebody's in charge of the entire system. This is all about saying the system's done. Because, if we do all these things, if we manage to achieve scale, if we manage to achieve decentralization, if we manage to achieve a sufficient level of expression that you can do all the kinds of things that you want to do, then the system should live on organically and naturally decades into the future like the internet did. Should be useful. Okay, so that's down there, and let me get Basho. Sorry, buddy. So are we done? No. We need more. So this is a great roadmap, and there's a lot of great ideas here, and we've written tons of code and lots of papers, and products are shipping faster and faster. But we need adoption. We need to bring users in, and how are we going to do that? How are we going to bring millions of people into our system? It doesn't matter if you have great technology. It doesn't matter if you have great ideas. PGP was a great idea, and it's probably one of the most tragic stories in the history of the internet. You have these brilliant people like John Callis and Phil Zimmerman, and even Hal Finney worked on it a bit. And they said, wow, we can build an internet that's password-free. Think about that. Just one click to log in. You never have to remember a username and a password. This was in 1991. This whole web of trust concept. We can encrypt every communication. You don't need web certificates. You don't need any of these things. Basically, you're in control of your identity and your credentials, and this is going to be so seamless. It's clearly a massively superior technology to where the internet went. But the user experience, the adoption curve, just wasn't where it needed to be. It was too complicated. People didn't get it. So that beautiful path we could have gone down that would have made all of our experiences, all of our commercial transactions much more secure, and frankly probably would have led to the rise of Bitcoin much faster, just was forgotten. So if I deliver all of this, I will have completed a DARPA project. And I would say, wow, look how smart we are. Somebody's going to go commercialize it and turn it into Siri, huzzah, or a Yasti, or any of these companies that somebody will buy. And look, we made some money. That's great. But I wouldn't have changed the world. So we need adoption. So the soul of the project has always been Pan-African in focus. IOHK aggressively entered Africa. And when I say aggressively, I meant we physically moved people there and said, you have to live there. Drink the water, eat the food, know the people, spend time there, and train people, set up offices, meet leaders from Africa. We met the son of the president of South Africa. We've met prime ministers. We've met various presidents all across the continent, north, middle parts, eastern parts, southern parts. And one way or another, we've met probably people from all 52 countries. And the last year and a half, not only have we had a great opportunity to meet people, we've had now a great opportunity to do business with people. We've started signing some very interesting MOUs. And I won't go into details about all of them, but one in particular is really magical and really special. So in Ethiopia, we signed a really interesting agreement. We've been working with the Ministry of Innovation and Technology now for about a year. We trained 23 Haskell developers there. And we went to the ministry and said, we don't want any money. We don't want any accolades. We just want an open classroom and your brightest minds. Give us access to these candidates, and we'll train them. And then we'd like to do something with them. We'd like to build something with them. And they said, sure. And all the candidates need to be women. We said, okay, that's going to be an interesting class. And they gave us 300 different resumes, which was really a magical, incredible experience. We thought it would be difficult to find candidates. Not only was it the other direction, it was difficult to decide how to filter that set because they were very qualified, surprisingly qualified, more qualified than if we'd went to Colorado or other places and looked for people on a moment's notice. And we filtered them down to 23. Lars and Paulina and Phil lived in Ethiopia for a little bit and trained them, and all 23 graduated, and now they're coming on board. So at the graduation ceremony, we were pulled aside, and they said, wouldn't it be so cool if we could build some sort of token that could be used in Ethiopia? And we said, wow, that would be really cool. So we talked to the ministry, and we signed an MOU with them to build something for Addis Ababa. So we'll make an announcement at a slightly later date of the particular details, but it's a really amazing project, and it's something that we think will end up having millions of users soon. And it's not just a token that'll run somewhere in the Cardano family. You know, my dream for these things is to combine them together with identity. something that's near and dear, something I care so much about. So our hope is that we can build infrastructure around this token that will also contain digital identities that can allow people to assert, to vote, to sign contracts, to do all these types of things. This is why the Tangem relationship is so powerful. Because if you're going to transact in countries that don't have stable internet access and they don't have a stable identity space, and you're going to give them a digital currency, you also must give them a wallet. You also must give them some way of signing transactions. And you must give them something that doesn't require an internet connection, and it's got to be cheap. And these cost about 30 cents to make. They're cheap. And their capabilities will continue to grow day in and day out because silicon's cheap. It's super easy to make things. 6 cores live on that device. Super easy to fabricate. So that's one great project, and it's under a family of projects that live within a framework called Atala. It's a new product we're announcing at the summit. And Atala is basically what we mean when we say Cardano Enterprise. So we've had a skunk works at IOHK working for over a year, writing basically our version of Fabric. It's an enterprise ledger framework, and it's specifically built from the ground up for solving problems within countries. Like, you come to me and say, the fertilizer that gets shipped into my country seems to have this magical property where it grows legs and walks off. Or the bags, they just go on diets. They come in as 50 pounds, and by the time they come to me, they're 35 pounds. It's a real problem, and I've had well more than 1 or 2 people tell me this, from the ATA to others in Ethiopia and other countries. So wouldn't it be so nice if we could track and trace that? We've had people come to us and say, we'd love to put QR codes on your cup of coffee, and you can take a picture of that with your phone, and then you could trace it all the way back to the farm it came from. Which farmer grew it? These are the kinds of problems we're discussing. There's a big issue of academic fraud, an issue of verifying credentials in Africa, and that's something that holds everybody back. Can you imagine that? Getting a PhD, working for years and years and years in your life, and making it really, really difficult to actually verify you say you are who you are. It takes weeks, months to get your academic records to your employer. In some cases, they get lost in the mail twice, 3 times, 4 times. Wouldn't it be so cool if you just click a button and verify it with an app, anytime, anywhere in the whole world, never even have to talk to the university? That'd be great, wouldn't it? You see, so these are the kinds of systems that Atala is basically built from the ground for, whether it be municipal currencies, whether it be identity systems, it be property registration, it be voting systems. And John O'Connor has just done a phenomenal job running around the entire continent, talking to people, and we have an overwhelming amount of MOUs that we could sign and projects we could go and pursue. In fact, when we first talked about the Africa strategy, we said, boy, will we have enough business? Will there be enough people? And now we're talking about how do we chop down the MOUs? How do we get actually the really good ones from the many, many ones we could do? And it's just super exciting. You know, the other thing is that while these are simple problems to state, they're tremendously complicated problems to solve. And you ask, well, what does this have to do with Cardano? How do we actually leverage this? Well, you see, here's the thing. All this tech that's on the floor, all this tech that we've built, all these things that we solve, they really rely on people to be useful. Well, here's the thing. If we build a supply chain management system for Ethiopia's coffee industry, what does that really mean? It means that we've taken 3.5 million smallholder farmers who are unbanked and have no identity, and we've now just given them a digital identity and a payment system and credentials that I can interface with and be interoperable with. And what does that mean? It means that they can now use Cardano. And do you think I'm going to wire that into Ethereum? No. I'm going to wire it into the Cardano network. Why? Because they need remittances. They need microfinance. They need insurance. They need to be able to collectively bargain. Well, Ada's dead. Actually, that wasn't Ada. That was Byron. He is dead. Byron's gone. You see, so they need these types of things. And when I build a system, I'm not talking about Cardano. I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies. I'm just talking about, hey, how do I get you a better price for your coffee beans? Hey, how do I solve the fact that you don't actually have a deed for the land that you live on, and you'd really like some documentation so that when you die, you can give it to your kids? These are problems that they care a lot more about than the price of ADA, a lot more about than the price of Bitcoin or EOS or any of the things we seem to think about or care about in the Western world. They're fundamental to their quality of life. And by solving that problem, we have now built a bridge to bring them into our system. And we've built a bridge that has all this magical programmable capability. We've built a bridge that isn't controlled by anyone. We've built a bridge where they have actually a voice for the first time ever, and a bridge that when they join the network can sustain them and deal with them. And it doesn't cost $50 to send a transaction. It'll continue to stay cheap, and it'll always be cheap, because as technology evolves, it gets more capable and the costs continue to go down. So that is how we're going to get millions and millions of users. We're going to go and do enterprise deals. And every time we do it, we bring people into our ecosystem from all around the world who have never been in cryptocurrencies before. I don't have to poach a single user from any of my competitors. They can stay the same size, they can double in size, it doesn't matter. We're playing different games, we're in different markets. And this is why there isn't an enormous rush to immediately release something and grab as much market share as quickly as possible. Because once the standard sets, it's set. It's not going to set immediately, guys. How long did it take to get IPv6 out? Think about that. How long does it take to change anything on a global scale? We're still trying to figure out how to move securities across borders. And how long have stocks been around? So it takes decades of hard work and hard progress to be able to have small victory after small victory to actually change the world. The only place in the world that's in a rush to change is the developing world, because they're being forced to. You see, they say, oh, well, what if they don't want to adopt a supply chain system? What if they want to just keep agriculture the way it is? How can you have fair trade mandates? How can you have carbon reduction mandates? How can you have mandates for sustainable farming practices but not be able to measure everything? They say, verify you're using this fertilizer. Verify you're using this farming practice. Oh, wait, it's all in paper? No one's documented? Nothing's documented? Then you can't verify. What does it mean? You can't sell on a global market. You lose market access. So whether they like it or not, the world has to change. So this is an opportunity for 3 billion people to come into our economy, the crypto economy. Not the US economy, not the European economy, not the legacy system. There will never be uttered, what's in your wallet? There'll never be uttered, let's get a Chase account. It's going to be crypto first and always. And you know what happens when you get 3 billion people all in one system that actually has these kinds of ethics? You get rid of too big to fail. You change the world. And that's what I signed up for. That's what a lot of you signed up for. You know, this movement is not about coin market cap, and it's not about when Lambo. It's never been about that. This movement is about changing the way everything works and putting everybody in charge, not just a small group of people. So we did our best, and the scientists and the engineers who did their best are here at the conference, and I'd like to thank them from the bottom of my heart. They've been working for 5 years, and they're going to work for another 5 years and another 5 years, and we'll just keep that going. But they're not going to be able to complete that mission unless we can get the world to work with us. So we'll do our part in bringing the developing world in, and we'll do our part in bringing the universities in, but ultimately you have to do your part. And that's all about just using the product, liking it, telling people about it, and telling people about crypto, what this is all about. And you know, I don't know who's going to win, but it doesn't really matter. One of my favorite companies is Netscape. It's a failed company, no longer around. You know, from a VC standpoint, it's like, oh, well, what are you going to do? But yet they created JavaScript and the cookie and the certificate. The web you have today is because of them. The experiences you have today is because of them. And frankly, the people in this room are building the experiences of the future for the space. I hope Cardano is the one that ends up being the thing that delivers it to everyone, but it's all open source, it's all patent free. We don't possess any IP, we don't control anything. Never been our mission. Our mission's always been just giving it to everyone. So, welcome to the summit, welcome to Miami, and let's change the world together.